What's up, universe? My name's Taylor, you're watching The Lighter Side of Life, and today we're looking at classical civilization revision material, specifically Imperial Image. You'll have to excuse my microphone, I'm afraid. I'm not a professional level YouTuber, and I don't think I ever will be. That's not really the dream here. But yeah, let's get right into it. So first things first, we've got a couple of basics of what we're going to go through in this video. This is the Imperial Image section of classical civilization, but unfortunately I cannot include the literary sources. I will be showing you them later on in the video, but I do not have quotes or passages from them set up quite yet, and I probably won't because there is a lot of literary material. And to be honest, to cover it in Minecraft, it's just not going to be that entertaining. So it's just the physical prescribed sources today, but I'm sure that's fine. So we'll be starting in essentially what is my rendition of the Parthenon, or at least some kind of Greek temple. This will be the center base for this video. Likely not later on videos, but that's fine. I'll have a different set created for that. But today we're going to start with some key concepts that are a big part of the Greek world. So Roman, rather, actually. Yeah, okay. We're already getting it wrong, but that's fine. So we've got Imperium, which is the right to raise and command an army, obviously. We're not raising the dead. We've got Princeps, which is the first citizen. Augustus named himself the Princeps because his ego just wasn't big enough. Concilium Plebis was the legislative assembly of plebeian people. So that's just the common people gathering together and making decisions and talking. And Fasces, these are a bundle of rods carried by the lictors, who were bodyguards for the consuls and the proconsuls and all that. We also have the Tribunicia Potestas, we'll get into this later as well. It's the right to veto any law, and it's the power of the tribunes of the plebs. So actually it's a really important thing that very late on in Augustus's life is actually given to him. A consul, this is the highest ranking of magistrates in Rome. It's essentially the king and what develops on to be the emperor. Auctoritas, this is supreme moral authority, which clearly Augustus has. And dictator, this is emergency power for a limited time. They had a different definition of dictator than we do these days. This was very temporary, possibly about a month. I'll have to check on that. But yes, it was not supposed to be permanent, and essentially this is what got Julius Caesar assassinated. So now we're going to move on to some of the contextual information, which is not just contextual and useful for Imperial Image, but it goes across the Odyssey, the Aeneid, and Greek religion, which are the other three topics that classical civilization has been studying. Unfortunately, this bit of information I didn't put chronologically because my notes are absolutely phenomenal. So we start with the Battle of Mutina, which was in 43 BC. That was Antony versus the Senate and Octavian. We have Philippi, which was 42 BC. Antony and Octavian versus the assassins, as they decreed that they would kill Julius Caesar's assassins. We have the Battle of Naulochus in 36 BC, which was Octavian versus Pompey. If you note, these three here are not foreign wars, they are civil wars, which was not good for the reputation because you weren't supposed to fight your own people. Maybe Pompey not so much, but it was still a civil war. Actium, 31 BC, this was Octavian versus Antony and Cleopatra. This was technically a civil war because Antony was a part of it and he was a Roman citizen, but they directed most of the hostility towards Cleopatra, which painted it as a foreign war. So it was really good for Octavian's reputation. We have the Parthian War in 53 BC. Crassus had the standards taken and 40,000 soldiers were killed in an ambush. Not very good. And then they continued on with Parthia in 36 BC, where Antony lost a quarter of his army. And in 20 BC, the standards were returned and it was painted like a victory, even though there was no war. It was just an agreement to give the standards back. I swear Minecraft makes the creepiest noises. We have the Dalmatian campaigns from 35 to 33 BC. Octavian actually fought in these wars, so that was great for his reputation, and they were foreign wars. We have the 27 BC Gaulish Wars with Marcellus and Tiberius. They were, at the time, Augustus's heirs. So it was important for them to start getting in the public light. We have the Spain and Tarraco 26 to 25 BC wars. Augustus was given a triumph, but he actually declined it. He was hailed as Imperator, but he was actually too ill to return to the city, so he had to stay outside the city. And then we have the Spanish campaign in 19 BC. Again, the fighting actually renewed, and people ignored it until Agrippa went back in 19 BC and fought them and defeated them once and for all. So this is some more contextual information. This is the downfall of Mark Antony. This is his fall from grace. Essentially how he became a Roman citizen and transformed into this Egyptian, basically. He was campaigning in Armenia after the Parthian defeat, where he lost, as we saw earlier, quite a large chunk of his army. And he returned to Alexandria to celebrate the legal triumph. Obviously, triumphs were only supposed to be held in Rome. It was very un-Roman to do this. He was dressed as Dionysus, who is the god of wine and debauchery and partying. Antony dragged the Armenian king behind in a chariot. This is part of like processions that usually happened in triumphs. This was all for the benefit of a foreign queen, Cleopatra, which again, very un-Roman, very bad for his reputation, and this essentially was the beginning of the end for him. Caesar was deified in 42 BC. That was 2 years after his death. He was assassinated in 44 BC because he declared himself dictator in perpetuity, which means, as we discovered earlier, dictator meant temporary emergency power. And perpetuity means forever. So he went temporary power forever, which is not temporary, it is permanent. And yes, that's what led the rest of the Roman elite to assassinate him. We've also got some more information here about Augustus, who died on the 19th of August in 14 AD, and after him Tiberius became the first official emperor. And Augustus and his wife Livia at the time were deified after their deaths, just like Julius Caesar. Caesar was deified after a comet flew over the games that they were held for him. And this again happened to Augustus and Livia. It became sort of a... It's also important to note that there were a first and second triumvirate, which is the tries, the three, the sort of group of leaders. The first is Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus, and the second is Antony, Augustus, and Lepidus. We don't need to worry about Crassus and Lepidus. If you've watched Horrible Histories, you remember it through the Horrible History songs Marcus Licinius Crassus, because there's a line in the song that says "round Rome with Pompey and Caesar." So that's how you remember the first one, and then you sort of just have to guess the other one. But it's pretty obvious Antony Augustus, a sort of love-hate relationship, and Lepidus is he's just in for the ride. We have some dates from Tiberius and Caligula over the other side. So Tiberius was 14 to 37 AD. He left the state in a really strong economic state, which was great. But he was even more stoic than Augustus. He didn't indulge ever. He saved all his money and he didn't spend it on big statues and things. So we've got Caligula, who was after Tiberius, 37 to 41 AD. He was actually assassinated by his own guard. He bankrupted the state and took over temples as his own personal play areas. So but he tried to make his consul a horse. He didn't, I believe, but he tried. and we love him for it. So here, the last bit of context, this is the Mos Maiorum, which essentially translates to the ways of the ancestors. We have Fides, which is loyalty and trustworthiness. We have Religio, which is correct religious practice. Virtus, which is valor, manliness, and courage. Clementia, which is mercy. Pietas is duty to the gods, but also duty to your family, and also your country, your state. Iustitia, that's justice and equality, and gravitas is self-control and steadfastness. So here we have the northern side. This depicts lictors, which are the bodyguards, the pontiffs and the quindecimviri. It features Augustus, Agrippa, and Octavia, which are all wearing hoods as sign of the priestly symbol as being modest in front of the gods. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the quindecimviri cared for the Sibylline books, which were cleansed and transferred around the time of the Ara Pacis dedication. These books were held in the temple of Jupiter, who was, of course, Zeus. Our boy, who is not quite as mad as Dionysus, but still quite a mad lad. The Flamines Maiores was a priestly order that Augustus revived, just like the Arval Brethren. There were previously only 3, so a 4th was added to honour the divine Julius Caesar, who of course was deified in 42 BC. So this is the western side. It features on the left Romulus and Remus, who are found by Faustulus. Obviously the twins, which are part of one of the founding myths of Rome. This is known as the Lupercal panel. And on the right we have Aeneas, who again is another version of the founding of Rome, sacrificing a pig to the gods with priests. Now we actually have a scholar here. We managed to get a couple of scholars in for this video, which is really good because we need them for the 30-mark essay questions. So this guy is called Cooley, and he says that the altar represents Augustus's ideas and self-representation, as well as his own impact on religion in Rome. And here we have the southern side, which depicts children running about between the hooded figures. Features Augustus and possibly Livia or Julia, I believe Julia the Elder. It's the entire imperial family, very important, relates back to that Roman values and tradition of family and religion. Now, the Ara Pacis stresses the importance of family, having a dynasty. Augustus struggled with that quite a lot. In fact, I would compare it to Henry VIII, who was desperate for an heir. It's quite a similar situation, really. It was a replacement of a triumph, as Augustus no longer celebrated triumphs because he was excising Roman values of modesty, and they liked what was called Stoicism, which is not being too emotional and not having great indulgences in your life. And yeah, it shows the founding myths of the Wolf Twins and Aeneas. So the first founding myth was Romulus and Remus. They were mothered by the she-wolf, and they created Rome upon the 7 hills. We also have the founding myth of Aeneas, who was a Trojan. After the Trojan War, he spent 10 years looking for a new home, and he landed in Italy. And he fought some great wars to earn the land that they'd landed on, that they'd sailed to. And yeah, that was founded as Rome and Alba Longa. So here we have the head of Livia, the next prescribed source. You see her great face right here. This was around 30 BC, so she'd been married to Augustus for about 9 years. It was after the Battle of Actium and made entirely from basanite, which was an Egyptian stone that was very expensive and clearly only accessible to the elite because of that reason. And it depicts Livia as a model Roman matron, showing traditional values and contrasting to Cleopatra, despite being made from Egyptian stone. She has a very modest expression and essentially embodies the successes of Rome and how she has helped Augustus achieve that. Now, there's something to note about Livia. She was the model Roman matron. She was the Roman woman. Now, she made all of Augustus's clothes herself, allegedly. She knitted them and sewed them all herself, which was a very womanly thing to do back then. The next prescribed source is the Calabsheagate, or Calabashigate, if you want to pronounce it like that. Unfortunately, with classics, there's a lot of mispronunciation, but since it was all in the ancient world, we're not quite sure. Or at least I'm not sure about scholars, but I call it the Calabsheagate. And this was an Egyptian prescribed source. So it was part of a temple complex that shows how Augustus's rule affected the rest of the Roman Empire. I mean, this was in Egypt. This is a long way from Rome. And over here we have the depictions of Augustus deified as a part of the Egyptian pantheon. He's being crowned by Isis, who was the Egyptian god of love, I believe. Yes, he's been adopted into the Egyptian pantheon, which is quite a big deal. And it was built from limestone about 30 BC. Again, after Actium, in the Bab al-Kalabsha, Egypt. So we have Augustus depicted in an Egyptian style, obviously. So it's a very odd depiction. The empire's never seen anything like it, and this was the Augustan. This was the opposite of the Augustan style. This was the Egyptian style. And he's making an offering. This is the signs of wheat sheaves, I believe, which is a sign of land, of plenty. He's giving land to Augustus, which again is a big deal because it means Egypt is now part of the empire. Now here is actually one of my favourites. This is the Sebasteion, which I believe is in modern day Turkey. It was started to be built around 20 BC and it was finished in 60 AD. So it took a long time to build. There's actually quite a lot more to it than just this little broken bit. And it was dedicated to Venus and the divine Augustus. There's quite a lot of Nike depictions on there, who was the god of victory, or the embodiment of victory. So yes, it's constructed in modern day Turkey by the local nobility, so it took a long time to build, a long time to fund. We have a scholar here again. This one is Tommen, and he says that Augustus with Nike was used to emphasize the peace and stability that was brought to Aphrodisias due to his many victorious conquests. Now that's quite important because Augustus did have many victorious conquests. And again, this is just like the Calabsheagate. This is an emphasis on how Augustus affected the rest of the empire. So here we have the depictions of Augustus with Nike to the right, being victorious. So it shows the triumphs of war in Augustus's military career, which is quite a big thing for him because he's less a military man and more a political statement. So this is the Forum of Augustus. I lucked out a little bit on the. So this is the Forum of Augustus. I cheated a little bit with the construction. It was a lot bigger, a lot more impressive than. So this is the Forum of Augustus. It was actually quite a lot larger than I've made it out here. But time is not on my side, I'm afraid. I leave things quite late, and I did not have time to make an accurate or large enough representation, but that's fine. We're only looking at these little bits anyway. So it was vowed in 42 BC, which again was the year that Caesar was deified. It was started in 28 BC, however, and finished in 2 BC. So yeah, again, like a lot of other things, it took a long time to build. It's clad in marble. Most of these things are clad in marble. They're not actually made from marble because that was way too expensive. It was used to declare war and give triumphs. People would march right up to the forum, get in there, and either be given a triumph or war would be declared, and they'd march from the triumph out of the gates of Rome. It wasn't a public place. Only the elite would have been inside it, the military elite as well. It uses both founding stories, again, like the Ara Pacis of Aeneas and the Wolf Twins, Romulus and Remus. So here we have a quadriga, which is the Augustus statue inside a chariot upon this platform. And to the left here, we have the kings of Alba Longa. So that begins with Aeneas and his son Ascanius or Iulus. Here we have Aeneas in the middle and the Julii family on the right. And on the right of the temple here, we have Sumiviri on the left and right, which are the topmost men. These are important men. And here's Romulus. Obviously, Remus was not the founder. It was Romulus killed Remus, and that's how Rome was founded. So on the right here, up above, we have Roma, and then we have Fortuna. We have Mars, who is the god of war, right up the top. Venus, and Romulus on top of the temple. Another statue of Augustus, because you can never have too much Augustus. Again, we've got Venus, Mars, and the divine Julius. It's very much a devotion to all of the gods and Augustus's dynasty, where he's come from and where he's going. So here we have the Mausoleum of Augustus. Now, this is a big one. It's right in the middle of the field of Mars. That was at first nothing there, and then Augustus went, hey, why don't we put a massive, great mausoleum right in the middle of it? And everyone just sort of accepted it. So anyway, work began in 28 BC. It was open in 27 BC and finished in 23 BC. So this was really quick, and we'll get onto the reasons for that later. So there's a little bit of context behind it as well. So again, we'll go through this. 40 BC, Antony marries Octavia. And then in 37 BC, Antony married Cleopatra. This was considered bigamy because he didn't divorce Octavia first, as this was adultery. This is very un-Roman, very rude, very disrespectful to Augustus, as Octavia was his sister. And in 32 BC, Antony's will was seized and read out by Augustus, and it stated that Antony wanted to be buried next to Cleopatra in Alexandria, which again, very un-Roman, and he's betraying his race at this point. People don't even consider him to be Roman anymore. Like I said, it was situated in the middle of the field of Mars and was funded by war booty from Augustus's campaigns, which he'd gathered quite a lot of. It encroached on civic space because it was so large, but the people loved it, even though many were illiterate. The res gestae, which was on the side of it, on the walls, which was Augustus's obituary, it was probably read aloud by quite a few people, so people would know what was part of it. Again, like the Forum, the brick walls were clad in marble, and there were two pink obelisks, which I believe were made from Egyptian stone, just to put the little cherry on top of, yeah, I defeated Egypt, I defeated Cleopatra. And it may have had a bronze statue of Augustus on the very top, which I've added quite gladly. So if we come up here, we see that the mausoleum reassured Romans that Augustus was convinced he'd already won the battle against Antony. This was all going on at the time, but Augustus knew that he had already won, and the people believed him. Reassured the Romans that Augustus was not leaving. He was committed to his role. He wasn't going anywhere. That was very important for them, because obviously Antony had left them. It is 42 meters high and 90 meters wide. It's big. It's huge. It's gargantuan. The Senate didn't like it. It recalled the power of Caesar, as you might recall. He declared himself dictator in perpetuity. It also recalled Alexander the Great. It became one of the wonders of the world. Alexander the Great also built something similar, but Augustus went bigger. So he was desperate to continue his legacy. That's what this is. This mausoleum is a family tomb. And like I said earlier, the walls are covered with Augustus's obituary, the res gestae, which is a huge bit of writing. And when I thought about doing it in Minecraft, I cried because there's so much of it. He had a lot to say. Everybody voted here, and it was the centre of political life, actually. It was He was really, really important. So if you just come in here, we've got a couple of graves to look at. Obviously, Augustus, 14 AD. He was buried here in 14 AD. We have Marcellus, who was the OG heir. He was the original heir for Augustus. He died in 23 BC, very young. Agrippa, 12 BC, very sad. Nero, Emperor Nero, 31 AD. Octavia, between 9 BC or 11 BC. I believe there's debate on what date she actually died. Gaius and Lucius died 4 AD, very sad, very young, again like Marcellus. Livia died in 29 AD, so not that long after Augustus. And Agrippina the elder, who was Agrippa and Julia's child. She was not originally buried in the mausoleum, but I believe her ashes were relocated here in 37 AD. Tiberius was 37 AD and Caligula was 41 AD. And actually, we've got the last emperor to be buried here, which was Nerva, which was 98 AD. He was the very last emperor to be buried here, which is quite sad because it came to an end. But yes, as mentioned, it is now one of the wonders of the world. And to be honest, Augustus did a great job. So we actually have one last thing to look at concerning this, which is this lone little grave over here. This is Agrippina the Younger. Now, she was excluded from the mausoleum for adultery, just like Julia, I believe, who wasn't buried there. There was a lot of adultery scandals going on, and Agrippina the Younger, unfortunately, was left out. Very sad. Now, believe it or not, I have actually done all of the coins. There are only 6, which surprised me. I thought there were more. But yes, we have all of them, and we've got details of them. So the first one is the 43 BC Aureus. It says, Gaius Caesar, consul, priest of augurs, dictator in perpetuity, and pontifex on it. It was the bare head of Octavian on one side, with Caesar with a laurel wreath on the other side. So Octavian here is linking himself with Caesar, although this was Caesar's coin. They had no enemies left, apart from the assassins, I believe, and Augustus began to build social reputation, but also features Caesar's illegal titles, which is not great. That's not great, but that's fine. So the next one's the denarius, 32 to 29 BC. It says, Caesar, son of a god, Divivilis, and has no labelled rolls on it. So it was the bare head of Octavian, and on the reverse it had Pax with an olive branch and cornucopia. So this one was commissioned especially to pay Augustus's armies, again peace, through war peace, and he was disassociating entirely with Caesar, less military, more political. He doesn't want to be associated with dictator in perpetuity and illegal roles like that. And the next one we have is the 28 BC Aureus, which said Imperator Caesar, Diviphilus, son of a god, consul, restored Romans to their laws and rights. It has Octavian with the laurel wreath and a priest reading scrolls on a bench. It was a religious lead, a good example, and the scrolls represented law and wisdom, and it shows him to have many titles and to be a really great military leader. So this is the Aureus from 19 to 18 BC. It has Caesar Augustus Divine Julius written on it. It has Augustus with a laurel wreath and the 8-ray comet, which shows the divine right to power, given a new name of Augustus instead of Octavian, and the divine lineage, as Augustus is now part of Julius's divine lineage, and now Julius is a god because he was deified, so now he's the son of a god. He's the saviour of citizens. He shows Caesar's comet and the great triumph. It was an unknown Spanish mint, and the ascending flame points to heaven, which obviously the comet soared across the sky. And here we have the Aureus from 2 BC to 4 AD. It says Caesar Augustus, Diviphilus, son of a god, father of state, consuls, first among young, Gaius and Lucius written on it. So it has Augustus with a laurel wreath and Gaius and Lucius on the reverse with priestly symbols. He was making sons known to the public and still linking to divinity. And after Augustus, the power was actually handed down via bloodline instead of people being voted in a democracy. And here we have 12 BC aureus, which was actually made with silver, so this nugget is wrong. That's fine. So we have Caius Antistius Triumvir written on it. Here's the bareheaded Augustus with the sacrifice items. It shows him to be modest. He has no titles. He's just a religious leader. He's not being overindulgent. Also features Sipulum, which was the ladle. Well, I'm sure it's not a ladle, but I've labelled it as a ladle, so we're just going to have to get on with that. The auger wand, which was a curly stick. Again, probably not just a curly stick. A tripod, we all know what a tripod is, and a pathra, which I've just put round, which is, it looks like a little shield on the coin if you have a look at it. Unfortunately, again, Minecraft can only go so far. So in 12 BC, again, Augustus was appointed Pontifex Maximus, and it was all about Rome and Pietas Religio, which is the correct religious practice and the duty to your state and to your family and to the gods. So these are all the literary sources. I'm not going to read them all out because there's just so many of them. But again, we've got actually a couple here. Like I said in the beginning of the video, I'm just not going to have time to go through these in a video. At least I don't think so. Perhaps closer to the time, because I've still got a few more, 4 more months. Lost the ability to speak English. I still have a few more months until A levels. The progressions don't so much bother me, but I might get that done. We'll see in future. But these are all of them. And now we're just going to have a really quick run through right from the beginning of where we study right to the end. Let's go. 44 BC, Caesar's assassinated. 42 BC, Caesar's deified in the Battle of Philippi. 41 BC, Antony meets Cleopatra in Perusian War. 40 BC is the Treaty of Brundisium, where Octavian gets the west, Antony gets the east, and Lepidus is given the African provinces. There's the senator's prescriptions, and Antony marries Octavia. 39 BC, Julia the Elder is born, and Octavia divorces Scribonia and marries Livia instead. 38 BC, war against Sextus Pompeius. 37 BC, Antony marries Cleopatra. 36 BC, invasion of Sicily, Lepidus's men mutiny against him. 35 BC, the Dalmatia campaigns. 34 BC, Antony's donations of Alexandria. 33 BC, Octavian's the consul for the second time, and Antony attempts to make Caesarion the heir to Rome, who is Caesar's illegitimate son from Cleopatra. 32 BC, Antony's will was seized, and the Senate declares war. 31 BC, Octavian's the consul for the third time, and the Battle of Actium. 30 BC, Octavian is the consul for the fourth time, and Egypt is invaded. Antony, Cleopatra, their children, and Caesarion are killed. 29 BC, Octavian's consul for the fifth time, and he celebrates a triple triumph. 28 BC, Octavian's the consul for the sixth time. 27 BC, Octavian's the consul for the seventh time, the first settlement where Octavian is named Augustus and given Spain, Syria, Gaul, and Egypt. 25 BC, Marcellus marries Julia the Elder. 23 BC, Marcellus dies. Agrippa marries Julia the Elder. Agrippa and Julia have Gaius, Julia, Lucius, Postumus, and Agrippina. Augustus is also given Tribunicia Potestas. From 22 to 19 BC, Augustus joins the Mysteries of Eleusis, and the standards are returned from Parthia. 12 BC, Agrippa dies. Tiberius marries Julia, and Augustus is named Pontifex Maximus. 2 BC, Julia Elder is exiled. 4 AD, Augustus adopts Tiberius, who adopts Germanicus. And in 14 AD, Augustus dies and Tiberius becomes the first official emperor. I hope this quick video was informative and fun, and hopefully I will be on to Greek religion next, although it might be the Odyssey or the Aeneid. I'll probably have to catch up for the progression exams first. But until then, have a good day.